Now I'm mic'd. Oh yeah, that sounds amazing. That was sarcasm. Thank you so much for coming. So I thought that I might just get to know you a little bit so that we know where you are on this journey, because that way I can give specific or more specific information to you depending on what brings you here today. So who wants to start? Sure. Good. Thanks for coming back. Okay.
Just working through the documentation and all the things that are required to put the application together.
Great. And you were at the previous workshop, weren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Thanks for coming back. Hi.
Hi, I'm just here to learn.
Great.
It's not in my immediate future, but I would like it to be, so
Perfect.
yes, and I was here before too.
Good. Well, I love sharing knowledge, so happy to share it. Who's next? Great. We will get you one step closer.
I'm Francine. I've been looking at a house out of Providence. I've been trying to move out of this town. I've been looking at how much I've taken from my Canadian Tire retirement fund, trying to get that application going, and yeah, it's been tough. I
And
know my price range. I know how much we can afford. It's just getting through the process of letting the bank say, yes, you can have your mortgage.
hopefully, yes. And what province are you looking at?
Ontario.
Oh, okay. So we own property in Ontario as well. So I can, if you would have said BC, I would have been like, I don't know what they're doing over there. They have some weird laws, but I don't know what they're doing. And that lovely front row, front-ish row. You did. Okay, fair. Hello.
Yeah, I think that I'm just wanting to think more about my long-term vision
Great.
for my life, and that involves real estate, buying a home, and I'm just wanting to know, like, as I think about those things, what is the best type of deal or home or property for me to focus on being at first, and yeah, I just wanting to put myself in space to learn more. Yeah,
Good. And how old are you?
I'm 24.
Perfect. I've been planning for this since I was 14. The earlier you start, the better opportunity you have. All right, well, let's get started. Now, like I said, if you have questions, you can raise your hand, or you can just say them. It's a small enough group. Let's get started. Okay, I always love great quotes. And this is one having to do with mortgages. The house you looked at today and wanted to think about until tomorrow may be the same house someone looked at yesterday and will buy today. I would say that this is the number one reason to actually get mortgages planned in advance, because when you do see that house, when it hits the market, you need to be ready to go, particularly in this town, but in a lot of markets. People are getting more savvy about real estate, and they're starting to understand it's a good investment, and properties are just getting snapped up like crazy. So the more you can know, the quicker you can react. So today we're specifically going to talk about getting the mortgage ducks in a row. Okay, so this is the part where you're at any event and your presenter has to give you some street cred so that you know that I know what I'm talking about. I bought my very first property when I was 25, and that is a picture of it, and I always laugh when I see the picture of it because it's remarkably ugly. And thankfully it doesn't look like that anymore. We've renovated it over the years. In my generation, we were always told that you were supposed to buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. That's what you did, and we did that. This is in Canmore. Back in the day, this is clearly not now, it was $222,000. And that was in 2002. I didn't put the date up there. And in 2002, our families thought we were nuts that we would ever spend that much money on a house. And we did. We sucked it up. And I'm saying we because that's actually my husband who coincidentally does IT here. We did. We sucked it up and we were like, this is where we want to live, so whatever it takes. I'd been saving since I was 14 years old, so I was ready to buy the house. And this is the beautiful thing about real estate. Hey there. It's okay, come on in. We purchased it for $222,000. If I had never renovated that house, we have renovated it. It's much nicer than the shag carpet and the wood paneling on the walls. If I had never renovated that house is worth about $850,000 today. And I can say that confidently because my neighbor's house is for sale, and it's almost an identical house, and they've never renovated. And to me, and to a lot of real estate investors, that's the most beautiful money you'll ever make. It's money that you didn't do anything for, aside from taking a risk and signing on the dotted line, as we say, and that dotted line is your mortgage document. How many people know this is actually tax-free? Yay, tax-free in Canada. Your primary residence in Canada is tax-free, so again, it makes it some of the best income that you'll ever get in your life. Now granted, it's not real income unless I sell it. We do still own this house, but when I sell it, I just magically get somewhere in the ballpark of $600,000 that I didn't work for. So I'm excited about that. More important than the actual investment portion of it, which I could talk at length, for us, buying that house had way more to do with a lifestyle that we were after. Financially, we would have actually been better off staying in our tiny apartment. Back in 2002, our tiny apartment was $600 a month. Again, unheard of now. But back then, we could have, for $600 a month, stayed in our apartment and invested the rest and had a really good return on that money that we invested. But for us, it had more to do with relationships, building relationships with people, having a pet, which is something that isn't always available if you're renting, and of course, building that equity as well. And so that's always really important to me, that why are we buying a house? Nowadays, we invest in real estate, so why are we buying them? Well, this is what we do for a living. But that very first one, and is this everyone's first home? Or have some people like purchased homes before? This is everyone's first home. You've purchased a home before, okay. That first home is important. You'll remember it for the rest of your life. Homes 2, 3, 4, and 5 will drift off into nothingness. But the very first time that you own something and you hang your artwork on the wall and you paint the walls for the first time, and the first time your sink leaks or some ridiculous thing. Anyway, so for us, that's the why. It has a lot more to do with being happy. All right. One of the things I've always found in real estate, and it's not just real estate, it's everything. If you've ever looked at investing in stocks or anything else, a lot of the terminology is really confusing. And so my role, what I like to do, is make sure that people understand what we're actually talking about. So every time I research real estate terminology, the actual definition is super perplexing. And if you read through that, that's the most impossible sentence to read. But that is actually a real estate definition. And we like to just bring it to everybody. Part of the reason why I find why these things get so confusing is that if we actually educated everybody on how to buy a home, there'd be more buyers. And that means that the wealthy would have more competition. And so I like to make it accessible for everyone so that you know what you're talking about, so that you're not intimidated when you go to the bank, you're not intimidated when you apply for a mortgage or when you're looking at finances. Because anytime that we're intimidated, we're gonna stay away from whatever that topic is. Okay, so let's get started. So believe it or not, the word mortgage is derived from a French word meaning death pledge, which sounds pretty dire. You will hopefully not be paying for this thing until you are dead, but the reason that that terminology came to be is that the mortgage is in place until the ending of the obligation, and they refer to it as the dying of that obligation. You will pay that mortgage until you pay off every penny or the bank takes your house back. Those are really the only two ways to get out of a mortgage. You either give them back their money or they get their house. Fair? The bank thinks so. We might not think it's fair. But really all a mortgage is a loan. That word doesn't mean anything else. It's just a loan, and the only thing that's different about it is that it's secured by a property. When you have a mortgage, the bank puts what they call what's called first position on title. And the other thing I want to mention, if I sometimes get caught in real estate definitions as well, so if I'm using any terminology that doesn't make any sense, just let me know and I'll correct myself. I think probably everyone is aware that, yeah, if you don't pay your mortgage, the bank happily comes and takes it away from you. And we don't want anyone getting to that position. It's super stressful, so we want to make sure that everyone knows what they're doing before they get there. So what'll happen is you have a mortgage document and they secure it on title, which means if you were to pull title for your property, it would say your name because you own it. And right below it, it would say the bank's name. And the reason that's in place is so that you don't then take, let's say, $500,000 from the bank and then sell your house but not pay the bank back. So this is the way the system works. And you can have second and third mortgages. I don't know that I'd recommend it, but you can have a bunch of mortgages on title. You can have a bunch of loans on title. Usually the one mortgage will get you done. So this is an interesting fact that I found. And honestly, when I bought my first house, I didn't know this either. So I'm sharing it. 39% of first-time home buyers have a poor understanding of what brokers do and their role in the mortgage process. Who has a mortgage broker? Who would like one? So this was my misconception, and I do think it's a common misconception. I grew up with that thinking of like, well, I'm going to have to pay them, right? I don't have any money. I'm buying my first house. I'm scraping by to get the down payment together. And it wasn't until someone explained it to me. The mortgage broker gets paid by the bank. So this means you have access to all of their knowledge and all of their effort, and they get paid on commission from the bank. You should absolutely be using a mortgage broker, 100%. And here are some of the reasons why. The first reason is you more than likely will get a lower rate. And part of the reason is if you think of a mortgage broker, they're representing who knows how many clients, 20 or 30 clients in any given month, which means when they go to a bank, they have a lot more buying power, as opposed to when you go to the bank and you really want that house, and they just give you any rate, and you might not know any better. So that would be the number one reason to go to a mortgage broker in my mind. I remember the first mortgage we ever got, it was prime minus 0.8%, which was awesome. At the time, prime was going down, so we were like, eventually will you have to start paying us back for our mortgage if it gets to low enough that prime minus 0.8 is a negative amount? That'd be great. Another reason is accessibility. Applying for a mortgage is a lot of paperwork, which you're about to find out. It's a lot of faxing of documents, listening to banks, being on the phone, you name it. And a mortgage broker does this all day, every day. They also work evenings and weekends because they understand that a lot of people are working during the day and they're not able to go to the bank. So it's quite predominant that mortgage brokers would, same with real estate agents, would work evenings and weekends so that you can make these transactions happen. Up next, customization. Because you're working directly with a mortgage broker that represents a lot of different banks, because the other way to get a mortgage is you go to one bank, and people tend to go to their own bank because they figure that's where they have a relationship and those people are more likely to help you along. A mortgage broker knows all of the banks, and they can find the lender, as it's called, that is right for you. So for example, I'm self-employed. A lot of banks don't really like the self-employment thing. And a mortgage broker will know that if I go to this other bank, they're totally fine with lending to self-employed people. They understand it. It's in their wheelhouse. There'll be another lender that's really good at condo properties. There'll be another one that's really good at whatever it is. And again, if you were having to travel around and try to figure out who those lenders are, that takes a great deal of time, where a mortgage broker can just do it like that. Yes?
So a mortgage broker isn't, you said it's paid by the bank, but it doesn't matter what bank? They can go to any banks and that
They can go to anyone. It's not even just banks. A mortgage broker can also go to a private lender. So there will be people that have money that want to have a really good, safe return on their investment. And investing in mortgages, if you're not in the US in 2008, is a very safe investment. So there will be people that'll be like, I'm getting a crappy 6% on my crappy, whatever my stupid other investment is, but I could get 8% from you. And maybe not you on your first house, you'll have much better mortgage rates. But once you start getting into buying house 2 and 3 and 4, people are having no problem to pay 8%, as long as it makes money, it doesn't matter. So a mortgage broker will have access to all of the banks. They will have access to the credit unions, other what's called B lenders, which is usually another, not really a branch of a bank, but like another division of a bank. And C lenders would usually be private lenders. As you go down the ranks, the interest rate gets higher and higher and higher. So yeah, it's literally like going to a buffet. The mortgage buffet. The other reason is that you have an ally. And what I mean by that is, buying a house is stressful. Buying your first one is probably going to be the most stressful. After that, it gets a little bit easier. You start to get used to how many people have kids? Is the first one the hardest?
I'm still on my first.
You have 4. You've got this. You're fine.
They're all hard at different times.
To me, the first one's going to be your hardest, because you're literally just, who's making these rules, right? You literally have someone that's on your team. Remember, they only get paid if you get a mortgage. In Alberta, thankfully, they are mandated by the Real Estate Council of Alberta, which means they have a fiduciary duty to do what's your best interest, which means they can't be doing any greedy side hustle, whatever. They have to get you into a house. They have a fiduciary duty to do what's in your best interest, not their own. And they're also there when there'll be days that you're like, I don't understand what the bank is doing, and they'll listen because they're accustomed to this. They understand how that procedure works. You end up being friends with them. It happens. And it's 100% free to you, so you should totally use it. And of course, there is their experience. And I'll give you a good example of that. A year ago, maybe it's a year and a half ago now, the Bank of Canada started changing their rules around lending. And those were all good changes. They wanted to make sure that Canadians didn't get into trouble by speculating on properties and buying more than they could. Unfortunately, I own a bunch of rental properties, and that made it very difficult for me to get additional mortgages. And I kept looking at these numbers, couldn't get approved, went to a different mortgage broker, and she solved that problem immediately because she said, is your primary residence paid off? And of course, at that point, I was so proud my primary residence was paid off. Of course it was. I only paid $200,000 for it many years ago. I'd paid it off. And that was her answer. She's like, no worries. We are going to put a mortgage on your principal residence and then just take that money and go buy all the rental properties you want. And up until then, despite my experience in the industry, I'd actually never thought of it. But for her, it was just click. This is how you get this done. So everyone is going to go get a mortgage broker? Excellent.
How do you get a mortgage broker?
Oh, you literally call one. They're all.
Really? You just
Oh, there's.
call and say, I'm looking for a house,
Yep.
and then they just.
Yep. You take the Rocky Mountain Outlook and you flip to the last 3 pages, and there is an ad for every mortgage broker in town. Yeah.
Since I'm looking out of properties.
You will look for a mortgage broker in your province.
Okay, I just.
Yes.
Okay, just. Okay.
Um,
Would it be better for someone in that town that you're looking in, or?
it doesn't have to be. If there's something unique about your town, like Canmore's quite unique. If you were buying a house here, I'd be like, I'd stick to Canmore. We've got some pretty unique zoning laws here and some weird lending stuff going on. If you're buying in like regular town in Ontario, you can pretty much go to any mortgage broker. Ontario will be the same. But I will say this. It doesn't matter if, there's a lot of people that you need to employ to buy a house. One is a mortgage broker.
Yeah.
One is a real estate agent, lawyer, and sometimes you end up with a financial planner, depending on how complicated, or an accountant, depending on how complicated this gets. To me, those are very important relationships. You need to be comfortable. You will go to one mortgage broker and they'll just give you the creeps. Like, I have no other way to describe it other than you don't meld with them very well. Go to the other one. Because you're literally going to be turning over to this person all of your confidential financial information. So I would not recommend, if there's anything, even if it's completely irrational, if there's some reason why you don't trust them, find another one.
Since I'm here and they're there, it's kind of hard to meet them, so I have to get
That is true.
family members involved to deal with this because
That is true.
I'm on the other side of the country.
In that case, what I would say is, if you have someone in Ontario, ask them for a referral. That's how mortgage brokers make most of their money, is referrals. Everyone thinks that they're like trying to hustle for that one deal so they can get that commission. They're not looking at it as just your one deal. They're looking at it that when they do good things for you, you will then refer them. So if you have people in Ontario, I would reach out to them. And someone whose values align with yours will have worked with a mortgage broker whose values aligned with theirs.
My dad's already set up a real estate agent.
Perfect.
So he's been sending me emails
Yep.
on any updated listings on the particular area I'm looking into.
You can also ask your real estate agent, because they will also have a pretty good idea of who's better for your situation, who might work better with you. But yeah, I always relate it back to dating. It's kind of like dating. You find someone that you're comfortable with. That's why I always say, if you have a same deal with a real estate agent, I've terminated real estate agents before. In essence, broken up with them because it didn't feel good. And I'm literally going to walk into houses with these people. I mean, they're going to be looking at all of our finances. They're going to be hanging out with my husband and I while we're making decisions about how our furniture is going to be. I mean, it's a pretty important relationship, so yeah. All right. And of course, convenience. You can literally make this call. They will already have a template. They will tell you everything you need to do. They will be able to answer your questions. I hope tonight I can share some information so that you're better equipped when you have those conversations with them. But you will for sure not be the first-time home buyer that they have ever communicated with. They'll know all the tricks, even the ones I don't know. Okay, so I promised we'd talk about what kind of documents you need to actually start on this journey. The first one you have to do is verify your identity, which seems pretty simple. You just need to cruise in with some photo ID, and you also have to verify what your job title is, which always threw me off. I could never figure out why they wanted that until someone started to explain to me how much money laundering and fraud there is in the real estate industry. So the Government of Canada has an organization that has a few checks and balances to make sure that there isn't fraud going on in your mortgage transaction. So they will ask you some personal questions, and they are verifying that you're you. There was a time that you could just get a mortgage and not show ID. And what if you didn't own the house? And someone just handed you $500,000 and you walked away. So that's kind of the first thing. They will always verify your identity. They will ask your real estate agent as well, will verify your identity. And they will ask you usually to sign something that's called a FINTRAC form. But unless you're planning on money laundering or doing fraud, you're fine, just sign the form. FINTRAC. Oh, I wrote down here it is. The Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Center of Canada. FINTRAC. They literally just ask you and you tell them, which I know sounds weird. You're just declaring it. But what's happening behind the scenes is that they're verifying if that makes sense. So if someone was into money laundering and fraud, they walk into that office and they're like, oh, I'm in like penny stocks. And then the next time they talk to someone, they say something different. For the majority of us, if you're a teacher, if you're a stay-at-home mom, if you work at the library, chances are good you've been in that for a period of time, and you're not always coming up with sketchy answers about what you do for a living. So be honest, and that's as easy as it is. No one's verifying it.
So photo ID should be my regular photo ID, or do I
Yep.
have to get a?
Or a passport.
Okay.
Yep. They're literally just verifying your ID because, like I said, nobody wants to hand out mortgage documents to someone that doesn't actually own the house. So. Doo-doo-doo. Yeah. Is there anyone here that's like speaks English as a second language, or no? The reason I ask, and I like to make sure that people understand this, unfortunately the people that are involved in money laundering and fraud will target people who are new to Canada because they're new to the system, they don't speak the language. Chances are good they might have come here from a country and they're trying to work ahead, which, you know, and that promise of like the Canadian dream, own your own house. Unfortunately, that's where people get into trouble with fraud. And unfortunately, what the people that are purporting the fraud are doing is they're convincing someone else to sign for the mortgage to inflate the property of the house. So they'll ask one, and it's usually foreign buyers, they'll ask one foreign buyer, I'm gonna get you this house and all you need to do is sign this piece of paper. Then they go to the next foreign buyer and get that person to buy the same house. Then they go to a third foreign buyer, ask them to buy the same house. And what the bank sees is that there was a bunch of transactions and that the house was probably higher in value because people were fighting over it. When in reality, it was all the same house. Did I explain that well as to how this is how fraud happens? Because now the bank lends out $700,000 when the house was only worth $500,000. Where did the $200,000 come from and go? It came out of the bank's pockets and into the person purporting fraud, and they're long gone. I should stop telling people how to do this. Anyway, my point is, if you have any friends or family members that just be careful if they ever come to you saying stuff like, I got this great deal and all I have to do is sign on this line, I would check it out. And that's what FinTrack is there to do. They're checking all of this. Okay, the second thing that your mortgage broker, or your bank, if you decide to go to the bank, that's fine. The second thing they're going to do is make you go through income verification. The first thing they're going to do is ask for a letter of employment. I generally have one of these before I even talk to the bank, because I know they're going to ask for it, so I've already gotten it. It is literally a letter. If you work for a bigger employer, they're used to providing them because they get asked for them all the time. If you work for a smaller employer, you might have to give them a template or something. All that letter of employment says is, Charlotte has worked here since 2001. She's in the position of whatever the position is, and she makes this amount per month or per year, and this is how many hours she works. The reason the bank wants to see it, they want to see that you're past your 3 months probation date. So the longer you've been at that employer, the better. If you're applying for a mortgage before you've hit your 3 months probation date, I would strongly recommend waiting, because most of them will be like, that's not guaranteed revenue, you could get fired tomorrow. If you're past your 3 months probation date, you have to be remarkably not awesome. There's less of a chance. There's less of a chance that you wouldn't have that job 3 months from now. Yeah. The next one they're going to ask for is a recent pay stub. Again, they are verifying your employment. They're also making sure that your friend didn't steal the letterhead from HR and just type out whatever you wanted to say. They're going to get your actual most recent pay stub, which generally has your year-to-date earnings on it. And they're going to do some quick math and be like, yep, that added up. So you need to prove this money is coming from somewhere. The other thing to verify your employment is your last 2 years of tax returns. Is anyone here self-employed? You will definitely need your last 2 years of audited tax returns. And audited means you've received a notice of assessment, meaning the government has verified that they believe that's how much you have made, and they've put it on their lovely government letterhead. But this one is really important because, of course, if you're self-employed, your income can go up and down, or it can start really low but ramp up. So they want to see the last 2 years. They assume that you're going to do better next year than you did this year. Okay, so some of you are self-employed. Does anyone earn tips? Gratuities? Do you claim them? I won't judge. Yeah, the reason it's important to claim them, and I'll say this for the benefit of the others, is that if you don't claim them, and I was a server, my husband and I were servers when we first moved here, we paid tax on that money. And we worked with a lot of people that were like, oh, it's tax-free and it just went in my pocket. Except that we have houses now and those people don't. And the reason was we were able to verify that income. You could go back to my tax return and it would say how much I made in regular employment income, and then it would say how much I made in commissions, in essence, extra income. And I had 2 years back of verifying, and for anyone who's ever been a server, your income is this much, but your tips are this much. So if you are in a position of making tips, you'll want to claim it, if you want to get a mortgage. Yes? Yep.
For me, in the last few years, the work that I've done has been consistent, both on like the type of work I was doing, how often I was working, where I was working, and my travel. So when applying for a loan in the past, I had a challenging time. So now as I'm thinking about, like, okay, what happens if I want to apply for a loan to buy a home in a few years?
Yeah.
What can I do now to make that as organized as possible? Or yeah, just any insights on that?
Yeah. What type of work do you do?
So typically, I work as a contractor doing marketing, business development, consulting,
Okay.
or web design, social media. And again, I've done a lot of different things. Hosted retreats internationally. Yeah.
And do you do that through a corporation or through, or those companies hiring you individually and you're sending them
So at times,
an
I'm
invoice?
hired by marketing companies as an independent contractor.
Okay.
Other times, I have kind of just as a freelancer in my own business, but not a corporation. Just like me, I have a GST number, and then that's it. So I guess that's part of my question is like going forward, should it be should it be incorporated and like, and then
Okay, so my first thing that I would say is, so for example, if you would have said, I do landscaping and every summer I work for this guy or that guy, my advice would have been, set up a company. So that what appears on your income tax is that I was a company and I gave that guy an invoice, which you can totally do if you're landscaping or whatever else. So if you're already doing that, then I would continue with that, where it's your company, and even though these people are subcontracting you and hiring you as an independent contractor and whatever else they're doing, you have an invoice and you're claiming that in your tax return. Whether or not you're incorporated, incorporation honestly has a lot to do with how much taxes you pay and your liability. You probably wouldn't need to be incorporated, but I would be claiming that all as self-employment income. But is it still going up and down? Because you said sometimes you travel and...
now I am on the trajectory of just going up.
Okay. Stay on the trajectory of still going up, right? And it might take you 2 years now. And really 3, because you have to go back 2 years and have those taxes filed. And also make sure that you file your taxes right away. Self-employed in Canada, you technically don't have to file your taxes until June 15th, 30th. And I would sometimes do it late, because I'd be like, I've got till June, it's fine. However, May comes along and you want to buy a property, and they're like, you don't have last year's notice of assessment. So now I'm like doing the taxes in January, as soon as possible, so that I have 2 years, which have hopefully shown an increase in revenue. So I'm sure you enjoyed your lovely time traveling. I did too. I still do. But yeah, they're going to want to see some stability.
And what would be the best equivalent to a letter of employment?
The best.
Equivalent to a letter of employment.
So you won't have a letter of employment. All you will have is your last 2 years of tax returns. If there is a company that you've done steady, consistent contract work, so for example, I've done contract work for the Banff Center for 19 years, I can get a letter from them it's 19 years. I'm probably not going anywhere anytime soon, nor are they. The contract is clearly a repeating contract. But yeah, if you've been working for different companies, you just simply won't have one. Sometimes what you can do, though, is you could, if you have a contract, like if someone was contracting you to work for the next 6 months on a project and you have a contract in place, you're just proving legally that you have the ability to pay. So those are some ideas.
Okay, so with the letter of employment, I know I can get transferred. Do I need a letter of employment from I know I need a letter of employment from my boss now. How would they, because the bank's gonna know this while you're doing it. So you're finding out how
Yeah.
to compare you.
Yeah, that's going to be a bit of a struggle. I would recommend talking to the mortgage broker and asking how they want to handle that. Because yeah, if you were buying a house here, you could have that letter of employment today and quit tomorrow. But yeah, it's going to raise some not red flags. I mean, there's nothing wrong with moving across the country, but
Because I asked the bank, I said, well, if you're getting transferred over, so that 3-month period thing, or whatever, probation period doesn't exist because I'm being transferred to the same, not the same, well, same company, but a different.
and is that how your company does it? They won't make you do your probation again?
No.
Oh,
They
perfect.
just get transferred.
Then even if you hated that job and have no intention of working there in the future, I would work for them for 3 months when you get there.
Oh, yeah, of course.
A means to an end. Like,
Yeah, but the letter of employment, though, do I need to get a letter of employment from them too, and say, here she's being transferred, or this is what she's going to be doing?
I would double check with the mortgage broker to be sure, because I've never had to do it where I'm moving while I'm trying to get the mortgage. But anything you can do to make it look more legitimate and not raise red flags, right? Because they're assessing you for risk, right? That's why I always think it's like dating. Every moment you go through, they're assessing you for risk. Like, are you later going to steal my car and break my heart? Like, that's what they're looking at. Okay. So the other thing that comes into effect is your credit score. And if you've watched any American television in the last, decade, you'll always hear people talking about their score. In Canada, we do scores differently. You'll never really know your score. There are 2 companies in Canada that will provide you a credit report. One of them is Equifax, the other one is TransUnion. They're free. I would recommend applying for one. They're totally free. They mail them to you. You only have to pay if you want them immediately. It is a good idea to check your credit report every now and then because weird stuff does show up on credit reports. Someone could have legitimately used your name for something else. Well, illegitimately used your name for something else, intentionally. A credit report could have just gotten misfiled because you have a similar name to someone else, and you look at it and you're like, there's no way I owe this hospital money. So it is a good idea to take a look at your credit report itself, but when you get your credit report, it doesn't have a magical number on the top of it. The reason for that is the 2 companies that do it, and your bank will do it as well, everyone has a different algorithm to figure out what your credit risk is. And they're all slightly different. There'll be one and they never tell anybody what it is because they don't want anyone to crack this code. So we kind of have a good idea what it is, but no one really knows for sure. The first thing they're going to look at is your payment history. Do you pay your bills on time? If you're paying them late, how late are they? Once it ticks over into 90 days, and we're talking any bill, electric, phone bill, cable bill, all of the bills, mortgages if you already had one, car payment. If it ticks over into 30 days, it's not so bad. If it ticks over into 60 days that you haven't paid it, it's not great. If it ticks over into 90 days, go ahead and assume that your credit risk factor has just taken a nosedive. So I always recommend, it's easy to lose track of this stuff. Put it on auto payment and just make sure that it's paid on time. They're also looking in that payment history, well, how many things did you have to keep track of? And how many of those things are delinquent? So for example, right now I own 8 houses. mortgages, electric bills, phone bills, like all of the things. So if I've missed 1 or 2, it's not a big deal, right? I had somewhere in the ballpark of like 48 different bills that come due every month. If I miss 1 or 2, not a huge deal. If I only have 4 things that I'm responsible for and I've missed paying 2 of them, that's a different factor. So as much as possible, keep on top of keeping those things paid on time. And that's about, give or take, that's about 35% of what they're looking at. Do you have a history of understanding that if you've borrowed money from someone, you've paid it back? And that's in essence what you're doing. When you have a phone bill, you've used the phone and you pay them later. The next is how much credit you've actually used and your available credit. I have a credit card right now that has a $15,000 limit on it. I've never been anywhere near it. If you're always pushing up against the ceiling of how much credit you have available and how much you're actually using, that's another risk factor that they're looking at. And it's significant because that's making up about 30% of their decision making. So don't use all of your credit. Next up is the length of your credit history. So again, someone that's missed 2 payments over a course of 20 years versus someone that's missed 2 payments over the 2 months that they've had credit, that's a completely different risk factor. It only applies for about 15%, but it still matters. And this is why I always recommend get a credit as soon as possible. And I always tell this story. When I was 16, my dad said, you must get a credit card now. I had no reason to have a credit card. I worked a part-time job and I had no expenses. I mean, I was a kid. This is why he did it though, because I've had my credit history since I was 16 years old. And literally every month he told me, put stuff on your credit card, pay it in full every month, put stuff on your credit card, pay it in full every month. And from 16 years old, he taught me not to abuse credit, like not to do anything like, I think my credit limit was $1,000 when I was 16, but $1,000 to a 16-year-old is a lot of money. I didn't do anything crazy like run out and buy shoes for all my friends or anything. I understood that I charged stuff, I paid it off, I charged stuff, I paid it off. So by the time I was 25 and I bought that first house, I already had 9 years of a credit rating, right? I had a credit card, I had a phone bill, and my dad used to always make me get an RRSP loan every February. Well, make me. I mean, it sounds like he was torturing me. He was fine. We were all fine. But that's why he did it. Another thing that comes up with regards to this length of credit history, it doesn't happen as much anymore, but for the women in the room, there was certainly a time where the men took care of all of this stuff. And if that marriage broke down or something happened to your husband, you could easily be 55 years old and have no credit history. So I don't know if that's still going on. I've been with my husband since I was 20, but have your own credit history, even if it is just a credit card that you use for whatever. Have your own bank account, and this is why. Someday you might want to buy your own house. Next up is public records. So if you've ever had a judgment against you or if you've ever filed bankruptcy, they will search the public records. And bankruptcy will be a big one that takes a hit to it. If there's something else small, I would normally recommend don't have a judgment against you because that means you owed somebody money and they had to go to court to get it back from you. But they do look at all of those public records. And the last one, which seems insignificant at 10%, but it can add up really quickly, the number of inquiries into your credit file. So I mentioned earlier, I always relate this back to dating. If you continue to ask for credit, you start to look desperate. And it's the same as dating, because if someone was constantly going around, will you go out with me? Will you go out with me? I'd really like to go out with you. Will you go out with me? The 7th person that they ask to go out is like, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you are clearly, no, just no. That's the same way that they look at credit. So if you apply for a new credit card, go to the Brick and get new furniture, get a new car, and you keep asking for credit in a short period of time, it starts to look like desperation, that you're asking for too much credit. In fact, one of the best pieces of advice my mortgage broker, my very first mortgage broker, ever gave me was always apply for credit when you don't need it, because they will never give it to you when you need it.
So would that apply to the banks that are offering you a credit increase on your card every 3 months? Is that
The-
being desperate part, or is that they're offering you?
The credit increase won't hit it, but that will affect number 2, which is how much credit you've used and your available credit.
I mean, whether you need it or not, would you accept it?
I don't. That's just a me thing. You're welcome to take it. I'm just like, why bother? I never got anywhere near my credit limit to begin with, so. But no, that one won't hit, because they're not checking again. The bank is offering you that because you already have a good credit history. The people that didn't pay their bills did, well, that's not true. Sometimes the people that don't pay their bills get those offers more often because they know they can get more interest out of you. Someone like me, the only thing the bank ever got out of me was my 3% transaction fee, right? Because I use my credit card for everything. I will take those loyalty points. I will fly all over the world with those. So they've only ever, I don't ever pay credit card interest, but every time I do a transaction, the merchant pays the bank 3% for the privilege.
Coming to you, which they do, and offering me a $15,000 personal credit. But it doesn't make any sense to offer it when you're pretty much giving double that to the bank anyway.
Your choice.
They're hoping to cut you.
I will, however, say this though. The bank, are you talking about an increase in a credit card or a credit line?
Be a personal line of credit, and I'm like, but the money's in the account, why do I need more money?
I would take the personal line of credit.
And do what with it?
I would buy another house. Look at my face smile up. I'm like, what? Is someone giving me another line of credit? I'm gonna go buy another condo. That's why.
I just don't understand why they're doing it. Why they keep offering me a $15,000 line of credit when there's already $45,000 sitting in the bank?
Why do cocaine dealers keep offering someone a little bump?
They're hoping someone will screw up and they'll get it, make it money.
Sure. So the credit lines I do take. And that's why, because if there's a quick way to buy a house,
And what if you're not doing anything with it, you just pay it off? Like,
well, with a credit line, it can just sit there. I mean, you don't pay any interest on it, it's just sitting there. I have a $20,000 credit line right now that there's nothing on it. However, for me, I know it's a little piece of security. You'll hear a lot of financial planners talk about, like, you should have a 6-month nest egg and make sure you have 6 months socked away. I'm not gonna lie, I don't. I have a lot of money invested. If I have any extra money, I'm putting it on my highest interest mortgage. One day, my roof is going to leak, right? So I'm not recommending go out and blow it on trips to Vegas. Still take your money and invest it somewhere. But for me personally, it's like a little insurance policy. I know that at a moment's notice, I have $20,000 available to me if I want to put a down payment on a condo. The other thing I used to use my credit line for, I've said I've never paid a dime of credit card interest except for that one time, but they did refund it. I just forgot to pay it because I was on vacation, but they did refund it right away. When I was younger, I love traveling. When I was younger, I'd go on trips. Well, a trip, of course, my credit card bill is going to go from the regular amount it was normally for like groceries and gas and whatever. Oh my God, I bought flights and a hotel. I don't want to pay off the 22% interest on my credit card. So if I was a little bit short that month, I would just transfer the money from my credit line onto my credit card. Your credit line interest is probably only about 4%. And then I would just pay it off next month. I don't like paying more interest than I have to.
I'm not paying interest on anything, I'm just wondering why they.
Why do they do it? They'll get that interest from you somewhere.
Then that's pulling from your stock investments to pay it back.
I don't have stock investments. I only invest in real estate. When I was younger, I haven't used it in a while. The only time I use it now is if I need to get really quick down payment money, because it's really easy to just walk into a bank and be like, I need 10 grand because I just put an offer on a property. But for most people, I wouldn't say that I'm most people. Most people are under high amounts of consumer debt. Most people, if they had a $15,000 limit on their credit card and a $20,000 credit line, would be buying a new car. And so it depends on where you're at on this scale. If you're good with saving and you're not going to be tempted by it to do something crazy, take it. because one day your car will break down and one day your roof will leak and one day you will need easy access to money. The credit card increases I don't take, I don't know, it's just a personal thing. You're welcome to take them. Just don't use them. But when I was young, I took a personal loan so that I could build my credit rating. I would literally just take the proceeds of the loan and pay it back off again because I knew it appeared on my credit rating.
When the time frame came up or ahead of time? Do you get penalized for paying ahead of time?
That one I'm not sure about anymore. There used to be rumors that if you paid off your credit card in advance, that you, one, didn't get loyalty points, which is clearly super important to me, and that it didn't have the right effect. So if you're not paying interest on the money, then no, I wouldn't pay it off in advance. I pay my credit card on the day it's due every month. I don't need to give the bank any more access to my money than they absolutely need. That's okay. So those are the types of things that affect your credit score. Your credit score will not only affect what type of mortgage rate you make. In the last, I think it's 2 or 3 years ago, it'll affect how much you pay for your insurance as well. So a couple years ago, the insurance, whoever mandates, the Insurance Company of Canada, I don't even know what organization mandates that. Yeah, they were able to get approval to ask for people's credit scores to insure them. And the reason was, if you're responsible with money, you're probably responsible with your car. You're not taking wild risks. And they were able to basically draw a parallel between people that had good credit scores and people that deserved lower insurance premiums. So there's a couple good reasons to have a good credit score. And all of this happens behind the scenes. You don't even see it going on. You're going to get penalized no matter who asks for it. The number, in the US, a lot of the marketing says that you have to know what this number is. Like I've been in the US where people have it on an app and they check it every day. That they're like, oh, I'm at 720 today. All that matters is be responsible.
So
That's what they're going to look at.
Equifax and the other one.
TransUnion.
TransUnion.
Yeah.
When you inquire on those, is that a checking of it? So that comes under the like, oh, Amanda's checked on her credit rating. That's one check on her credit rating.
I believe yes, but I'm not sure. But if you check it once a year, it's not a big deal. It's when you have all those triggers at the same time, right? You're applying for a credit card, you're applying for a loan, you're applying for all at once.
So it was Union.
TransUnion. Equifax and TransUnion. And every bank will have a different algorithm. So it's not as though it's the type of rating where it's the same across all of them. Each one of them is assessing you on a slightly different scale. But a good credit rating is a good credit rating, and a bad credit rating is a bad credit rating. They're going to be off by a little bit. Okay. Who knows what I mean by GDS? The good old GDS. Excellent, no one. Then you came to the right place. There are 2 factors that the banks will look, well, sorry, there's 3, because they'll look at your credit score. The other things they look at is your gross debt service ratio, and it is the percentage of your monthly household income that covers your housing costs alone. So have you ever heard like your rent shouldn't be more than 1/3 of your income? That's usually kind of a general ballpark for budgeting. I know, I'm like, Canmore, this is hilarious. Your rent shouldn't be more than 50% of your gross income. Great. The mortgage companies are looking at it the same way. So there's one of the factors that they look at, and it's called GDS, gross debt service. And it's only these ones, oh, you don't see my mouse, never mind. You're taking your mortgage payment, your heating expenses, your property taxes, your condo fees, and you divide it by your income. So whether you do it, you can do it by month or you can do it by year, whatever, the percentage works out the same. And you're doing this gross before tax. That's one of them. And it kind of needs to be under 35%. Now, if it's over 35%, that doesn't necessarily mean that the bank is just going to go, no, you're over 35%. What it does is it just raises one of those little red flags about you. And you don't want too many of those red flags raised. You need a reason for why your heat's so much.
My concern is,
Yes, because you live in Canmore.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the banks don't understand that we're trying to get a house that is less, like the mortgage payment is like, a third
Yeah.
of what we're paying, plus including all these things is still less
And when
than
they
what we pay.
when they calculate this, they're going to be looking at what you're going to be paying for your mortgage.
Yes.
They don't care about what you pay for rent right now.
I know, but we're paying, it's just funny how we're paying more.
Yep.
And then we're going to be paying less.
And then they'll still say we can't qualify you, and you're like, I've paid twice that much for many years and been fine.
Is more than,
Yep. Good old math.
doesn't make any sense.
Nope. To be fair, they're trying to keep us out of trouble, right? They want to make sure people aren't making silly financial decisions and getting themselves into trouble. So the gross debt service ratio is one thing that they look at. Can you really just afford this house? Because they know that you're going to pay 15% in taxes, and you're going to pay some other percentage for groceries and all the other things that make up life. But they really want to make sure that this house is taken care of first. The other one is calculated in a similar way, but it's called the TDS. And the only thing that's different is that they add to it the debt repayment for any loans, credit cards, and car payments. And this factor or ratio has to be under 42%. So in essence, what the government is saying is don't borrow more than 7% of your gross income. If you're in a lower paying job, you probably shouldn't be leasing a brand new Hummer, because the price of that compared to what your monthly income is just off the charts. Now granted, obviously the government understands that people have student loans is a big one. I wouldn't recommend having credit card debt just because it's a super high interest rate and you might as well just get gangsters to lend you money by that point. Yep, and just keep at it. It takes time. Keep at it. But that'll be the big one. Credit cards are always the highest interest rate. Car payments are a fun one. I've never owned a new car. Another lesson from my dad. They lose half their value when you drive them off the lot. I've never owned a new car. I can afford one. I've never owned one. Car payments on another one, and I used to always remember my best friend always has a new car. And she would call me and she'd be like, Charlotte, the Honda dealership is offering 0% financing. You should buy a new car right now. And I'm like, you know it's even less than 0%? Not buying a new car. She only owns one house. I like to bug her about it. Anyway, so that's what they take into account. So you might be fine on your living expenses. You might have found the great property that the mortgage is within your means and everything else. But if they take all of those other loan payments that you're obligated to pay, loans and, like I said, student loans is a big one for a lot of people, car payments, if this ratio is out of whack, that's another one that they'll, again, it's not a flat out, you're over 42%, you're out. It's just another one of those red flags. If you start combining red flags, I have a low credit score, my GDS doesn't hit the target, my TDS doesn't hit the target, I don't have a letter of employment. These are all the things that kind of get you ushered out of the bank's good graces. Okay, so I didn't want to leave you, I know some of you were at my other event, and I know it was difficult to get up in Canmore and be like, let's buy a house. I totally understand that it's expensive here. There are some creative strategies that you can do. Now, luckily, you're going to Ontario, so you're fine. But are the rest of you buying in Canmore? We may need to be creative with this. Beautiful place to live, not the cheapest place in the old country. The first thing you're going to look at is either the obvious ones, increase your income or decrease your home expenses. Whether that means get a part-time job for a short period of time, I did. I hustled at it used to be the IGA, now it's the Save On. I hustled at the IGA to just push it so that they would grant that mortgage. I knew that we had really low expenses. So I knew that we would be fine, but I needed the bank to approve that we could get that mortgage. And the other one is decrease home expenses. So do you need the house? Do you need the bigger house? Do you need the house with the garage? Do you need the house that's on the river? Could you have a smaller house? Whatever that looks like. The next one is one that really helps, especially in Canmore or anywhere, is to add a guarantor or a co-owner. Does anyone know the difference between the two? Because they're often interchanged. A guarantor is someone that literally just signs on the line with you. So if it's parents are the obvious one, if your parents will back you up, what they're signing for is that if you don't make that mortgage payment, they will make it for you, and you're able to add their income to what you qualify for. Now, granted, that also means you need to have had a good life with your parents. So if you were borrowing money from them for the last many years and not paying it back, they may not be willing to sign that. However, if that's not your case, if you can get a guarantor to sign for it, you can get a higher mortgage. And this is something that would really help in Canmore, because we do have to kind of hit a bit of a higher threshold to get into the market here. The difference between a co-owner still signs on that magical dotted line, except that a co-owner is on title, and they're probably expected to live with you. And this is actually something that I recommend for Canmore. For a lot of people, I need to stop playing with my microphone. For a lot of people that live in Canmore, it's quite common here for people to have the same roommates for like 2 to 5 years. Just buy a house with them. You were gonna live with them anyway. You could both benefit each other and move ahead as long as you have an exit strategy. Because at year 6, you might not wanna live with them anymore. And what that means is that at year 5, you're gonna have an exit strategy of we're gonna sell the house and we're both gonna take our income, and now we're gonna have this lovely little pool of money independently, and we're gonna go do something else with it. Or you can live with them forever, whatever makes you happy. The next one is a creative strategy for Canmore. Look for something with a revenue suite, and Canmore, it's now, I guess, 2 or 3 months ago, they approved that revenue suites were allowed in pretty much all neighborhoods. There are some exceptions, so double check. If you can have a revenue suite, what happens is, if you are making $5,000 a month, but your suite is bringing in $1,800, even if you don't own the property yet, what the bank does is they send an appraiser out, and they'll appraise the suite. So there's an appraiser here in town that says, well, it's Canmore, so I know that a 2-bedroom makes X amount, and the bank relies on that information, and they say, great, if you bought that house, we know that you're going to be getting this income from this suite. And Canmore's perfect for that. We have 0% occupancy, so if anybody's gonna have some pretty awesome rental revenue with little risk, Canmore's a great one.
Would that be a less effective, equally, or more effective strategy if the home had a space to be a suite, but it hadn't yet been converted?
In order for the bank to approve that revenue, it needs to be a suite. Like, the appraiser has to be able to be like, yep, someone can move in here tomorrow. If you're able to get a house that has a future potential of a suite, and you can still qualify for it otherwise, I would still recommend one house is a liability, 2 houses are an asset. If you, anytime, rent is gonna go up. Like, I realize most of you are probably renting. Rent is gonna go up. Housing prices are probably gonna go up. However, when you lock in your property at, let's say it's, okay, if you're looking at a place with a suite, we're probably gonna say it's probably about $750,000 at least in this town. You're gonna lock in your property at $750,000, and there'll be property taxes, and maybe your utilities go up a little bit each month, but it's not a big deal. But that rent will continue to go up, but you've paid a fixed price for that house. It's not going up. And eventually, you get it. That's more income. And then you can travel more, and then you just rent out both units. Just travel all you want. Once you've qualified for the mortgage, they don't come back and ask you to qualify for it again, so have a good time. You can mortgage your first property to buy your second, third, and fourth property, which I mentioned earlier is what we did. And that's why we're recommending to people, get some equity. Everyone knows what I mean by the term equity? Oh, great. So when I bought my house for $222,000, and every year it went up a little bit because the market went up. So there's a couple ways that your equity in your home can go up. you can either have what's called passive appreciation, meaning I didn't do anything, the market just went up, just supply and demand made the price go up, magical equity. You can have active appreciation, which is maybe I renovated it and I got really good return out of my renovation. Maybe it had some super terrible, I don't know, for example, ugly wood paneling on my wall and I took it down and I painted it. That's active appreciation. I've put in a little bit of money and hopefully I've gotten money back. When you hear, if you ever watch HGTV and they're always like, you get more money out of your kitchens or your bathrooms. Yeah. The other really big way that you get equity is that every month when you make your mortgage payment, some of it is actually coming back to you. Only a portion of it was interest. The rest of it is coming back to you as principal. When you sell your house, you get that money back. So it's not like, I mean, that's the thing. You only get the money back when you sell the house. But one of the ways to get that money back is to borrow against that house again and buy another property. Did that make sense?
So it's not a complete loss when you're buying into a mortgage, you actually.
No, and that's the thing, right? I remember when we bought our first house, back then our mortgage payment was about $1,200 a month. And we had friends living down the street, renting for $1,200 a month. Believe it or not, a whole house. I know, it's amazing, but we've been here a long time. Well, for them, their $1,200 was entirely gone to someone else, as well as the risk of, what if my landlord wants to move in? What if they want to sell the house? What if my landlord's a douchebag? Like, I mean, there's like a million reasons that, and I'm saying this as a landlord, I own property. I mean, it works when you're young, and it works at other times in your life too. It's not the greatest model, unless you're on the other side of it and you're cashing the checks. Our mortgage was $1,200 a month. However, even though $1,200 came out of my pocket every month, half of it came back to me as equity in my house. Does that make sense? I can show you an amortization table, and maybe it'll make more sense. But some of that money is coming back to you. It's not coming back as cash. It's going to sit as equity in your house. And one day when you sell your house, you get it back. So that's why when people talk about, I have a friend right now that's selling a house in Canmore, and she's kind of disappointed because unfortunately she bought when the market was high, and she's owned it for, I don't know, I think maybe 8 or 10 years now. And she's selling and it's about the same price. And that's not normally what happens when you sell real estate. Normally it's gone up in value. But I keep reminding her, but you lived there, right? You had the enjoyment of your house, and then when you stopped living there, they moved to Ontario, you had tenants there and they were paying off your mortgage. So it's not entirely terrible, although it is much better when your property goes up in value.
Can you use the equity for house improvements?
Yeah,
Can you take out equity and use it towards renovations?
100%. Oh, sorry. 100% meaning yes, you can't take out 100%, they will only lend you 80% usually. What that is called is a home equity line of credit. And quite a few banks do it. In the past, what the model was you got your mortgage once, and that was your only payment, you walked away, and someday you paid it off. Now what the banks are doing is they're like, well, wait a minute, we've already secured the asset. So that's exactly what we did with our house. When the house went up in value, right, I bought it at $222. When we refinanced it the first time, the value was about $575, I think. So they would lend, where's my calculator? No, it was like after 2 years. That's why we like real estate. Now granted, will Canmore do that again? I have no idea. I do not have any such crystal ball. So we reappraised it a couple years later, and then they lent us 80% of the value of that, which was $460. And I had about, I don't know, $217 on that original mortgage, right? $217. So the bank said, sure, Charlotte, you can have another $243,000. Charlotte bought another condo with it. Like I said, don't be running off to Vegas or anything. I'd be really disappointed if you came to this class and then I heard that you were buying helicopter trips for your friends. But no, you absolutely can. Once they have it secured against your house, you could buy helicopter trips for your friends. The bank don't care at that point, but I would not recommend it just because it's not a great
And then would you get
plan.
to reassess the value on it that you've put into the renovations to,
Yep.
like how long after?
It depends on when your mortgage comes due. This was a slide that I didn't put in. Do you know what I mean by a payment penalty? Good old payment penalties. When you take out a mortgage, the bank is probably signing you up for a 5-year term. And they've calculated their interest, and they're like, great, in the next 5 years, I'm gonna make 20 grand from you. If you try to get rid of that mortgage earlier, they'll charge you a prepayment penalty.
So
So-
it's no favor to pay it off like extra.
The favor to pay it off, you can pay your mortgage off in advance. It's if you get your mortgage completely wiped out. So for example, if I get a mortgage from Bank A, and they're offering me 3.5%, and a year into my 5-year commitment to them, the other bank is offering 2.5%, this is to prevent me from just going over here. So it depends on the bank, and it depends on your mortgage terms. A lot of banks do allow you to prepay, which I would recommend. So for example, every month that we had extra money, we put it into our mortgage. And if we didn't have extra money, we didn't. It meant that we paid less interest overall. And so a lot of banks will have, they do all sorts of different promotions. So one of them is like double up a payment, and another one is pay 15% off every year. You can prepay your mortgage. What I'm talking about is if you completely, it's called discharging your mortgage. If you literally take that mortgage away, take it off title, and go to a different bank to put a mortgage on title, that's when you're gonna pay a massive prepayment penalty.
So it's not if you're just like putting extra money towards it.
No, no. Everyone's different, but I mean, every mortgage document I've seen in the last, I don't know, 8 years, they usually have a couple different ways that you can do a regular prepayment. And it's usually 15 to 20% a year. So this is what we did. My bank allowed us to increase our payment by 15% once per year. I literally had it marked on my calendar, and every year that they would allow me to increase my payment by 15%, I did it every single year. The mortgage was paid off in 12 years.
So what if you have, let's say you're in a 5-year term,
Mm-hmm.
and then you realize, okay, now suddenly you're in a higher income bracket, or for whatever reason you have more, you know, what dollars and you have more money. So if you were to pay your mortgage off in full during that 5-year term, because you're not going to a different bank, then you will not get the penalty, or you still get it?
It depends on what your mortgage documents say. In some cases, if you've gotten a killer rate at the beginning, this is one of the downsides of it. If you try to pay it off, there's a huge penalty. So if you do have a windfall, you've inherited money, whatever, bust out a calculator and actually look at it. In our case, and again, like how many times have I said this? I really don't like paying more interest or taxes than I have to. I have no problem paying my share, but I don't want to pay more than I have to. In our case, what our payment penalty was 3 months of interest. Well, we had powered through paying off our mortgage. So in the last like dregs of, you know, I forget how much, I could probably remember, maybe we owed $30,000. I don't remember what the number was. 3 months of interest was only $450. Take your $450, bank. I'm not going to have a mortgage payment anymore. We're good. So it depends on what it is. Sometimes it's 3 months interest, which if you're in the first month of your mortgage, it's a lot. If you're nearing the end of it, that interest amount has started to trail off, and it's not a big deal. But only a calculator is going to help you figure out whether or not you're better to do it. We've done it other times where it happens. I mean, I've paid a $2,500 penalty, which I wasn't super excited about, but I got another condo when I did. And that other condo was a revenue-producing condo. So it's like, sorry? Exactly. So it really depends on the unique situation. So just know what the mortgage payment says, or what the mortgage terms say, and it's a prepayment penalty. Okay, where were we? So buy a revenue suite, even if it's a future one. If it's something that there's future potential in, go for it. Buy somewhere that you don't live, just buy something. That's something you could do. But you have to rent it. Not everybody's comfortable with renting. You could live here and rent there.
And I would be fine with it if I had my family members to check on it periodically.
Then go for it, because Ontario prices are a lot lower than here. They do have land transfer tax, however, and we don't. Which is no fun,
So
but
I'm actually thinking of that, it's just because we need to get ready and prepare to actually move there. And if we had somebody actually living there before we got there, moved out like a month, then, okay.
the tenant laws in Ontario favor the tenant, and the tenant laws here favor the landlord. So double check it, or email me if you want. One of the only ways you can get a tenant out in Ontario is if the owner is moving in, but you have to give them 3 months' notice and pay them a month's rent.
Which I'm fine with. Because I wasn't like move right away.
Yeah.
I just needed
Alberta,
days.
Alberta, you don't pay your rent, we'll have you out in 5 days. Like, that's the difference between Alberta and Ontario. Alberta, I've decided not to renew your lease, bye. Like, it's a lot different. Go ahead, Leila.
Does buying a revenue suite actually help you get a mortgage? Like, do they look at that income potential?
Yeah, if it's ready to go, if it's move-in ready, they'll send out an appraiser. Sometimes they don't send out a real appraiser. Sometimes they literally just look at, it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom in downtown. Okay. The average 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom in Canmore is worth,
So if you were trying to buy a duplex, then the fact that you could rent out one half
Mhm.
of the duplex would actually influence.
they literally look at it as income. But they will want it to be appraised. Often, if you're buying somewhere new, they'll look at the rent appraisal. If you're buying somewhere existing or you're negotiating your rent, they'll ask you for a copy of the lease to prove that someone is paying this amount of money every month. Here's the weird thing. Your mortgage broker will even tell you to do this, and I find it so bizarre. They know that those leases can be ripped up the following day. The bank just wants to see that piece of paper. And I've literally had this conversation with my mortgage broker that I'm like, we're on the same page, right? That you understand this person isn't actually moving in. I actually manage short-term rentals, so we don't have future leases, right? Someone's gonna book for 3 weeks from now. I don't have a list of, I know they're coming, it's Canmore, but yeah, and literally the mortgage brokers will be like, this is how the banks want it done. They want a copy of your lease. So the number of times a mortgage broker has taken that, like your friend agreed to buy the place, or rent the place, sorry. I find it totally bizarre when they're all worried about fraud. I'm like, you're literally asking me to lie to you on a piece of paper. And they're like, yep, that's how we do it. Whatever. I wouldn't have recommended it, except that literally every mortgage broker recommends it. Another thing you can do is rent to own, which means that you lock in a price today and you pay a little bit extra on top of your rent, and your landlord actually holds that in trust. So let's say you pay $200 a month extra, and they're holding it towards your down payment. So that the day, and you sign a contract today. So you're like, what is this home going to be worth in 3 years' time when I'm gonna buy it from you? This little bit of money goes into a pot for you, and that can actually really help people that are renting. It is a bit of a confusing transaction, and not all owners are okay with it. So that's where it takes some, like I said, they're creative strategies, but they certainly get done. Ontario's big for rent to own. It's way more popular there. Yeah. Yeah.
Would it make any, to go into the average home that a lot of us want to go into, we're looking at 500,000. You can get some of those condos or whatever over in Blackstone that are Airbnb compatible,
Mm-hmm.
and they go for, 100,000, 150,000 less. As a owner yourself that rents out short-term rentals, does it make any sense to buy one of those and make it almost an income and a job, and then continue to pay rent to your landlord where you are? Or
100%. That's what I built my entire company on. There's two, as long as you're making more than you're putting out, right? Like, There's two factors with those properties. One is you can't get a regular mortgage on them. So that eliminates a lot of buyers.
So that goes into a completely different category when it comes to mortgage.
They're zoned. Rumor has it that someone in town is mortgaging them, but banks are very conservative. And so keep in mind, like I've dealt with this for a long time, right? Oh man, if the bank would give me more money, I'd own all of them. Like I would not stop.
So that's the reason why not more people are doing it, because it's a little
You can't get mortgages on them.
Ah.
You have to be very creative. So a lot of people that are doing that, they've usually got equity in their first home, and they're pulling the equity out, like I said, with a home equity line of credit or a second mortgage on their house. They're doing that because you can't register a regular title on mortgage, or you have to be really creative with your mortgage broker. And I promise you that if I knew a mortgage broker in this town that knew how to get around that rule, I'd own 8 more properties. There comes a time that they just don't lend on them anymore.
It becomes a full-time job, doesn't it? A cleaner, you know, checking all the reservations and follow-up.
I started with one. What I've actually recommended to our friends to do, like when I'm talking casually with my friends, 6 of you get together and just pay cash for one. Now you don't have a bank. You didn't worry about a mortgage. But 6 of you got together, because that's what it would take, right? A $500,000 condo at Blackstone. 6 of you, ask your parents for money, take out a credit line, like whatever gets it done. There's a lot of revenue there.
And is Whiteside manage it, or is it some private and some around?
You can have either at Blackstone. So you can either give it to them to manage. Don't tell Cleek I said this. Does anyone work for Cleek? They charge a lot. The on-site management companies charge a lot. The only time I would say manage it yourself, and this is speaking from someone who manages properties for a living. If you love hospitality, manage it yourself. If serving guests makes you want to pull out your hair, don't do it, because you will always be terrible at it. And a manager will just pay for themselves, right? Like, I mean, and that's not for everyone. I mean, I've seen people try to manage their own property and they're constantly cussing guests out because they were pissed off about something. And I'm like, well, that's a great way to get a negative review. Don't do that. You know, so, yeah.
No, like, you know those share condo with Solara?
Yeah, like a timeshare?
Yeah, is it worth it in a way that, like, if I never use it for vacation and I just rent it out for vacation, is it worth it? Like, you make really much money out of it? Or?
I've never looked at the actual financials for the timeshare, but in general, that industry is very prosperous. Now, granted, buying a timeshare is more expensive than if you just bought the whole unit, right? I think the timeshare is 1/12.
Yeah.
If you actually took that price and multiplied it by 12, you'd be like, that is the most expensive condo ever. However, if you could only get $95,000 together, and that's where you were starting, then I would say go for it. For me, I wouldn't. But again, I'm not there. But if I was back being 24, I'd be like, oh, fine, $94,000. I will start somewhere. Anyway, but it is worth looking at the financials. The only thing with the timeshare, though, you can't self-manage it. It has to be managed by the on-site company.
So then, like, I know they, and like Solara, for example, I know they manage it all and everything, and I don't know what it costs in terms of management, but I was just
50%.
if it's like
50.
of your rentals, so I think that's a lot.
It's a lot. You probably saw my eyes lit up when you were like, I love to travel. I'm like, oh, I'd be traveling all the time if I could. Anyway, that's what I live in a vacation rental, which means when I travel, I just move out of my apartment and someone else pays for my vacation. I do it on purpose. We moved out of the 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. I still own it. It's rented.
That's one of the main reasons why
But
we bought our house, is because we do love to travel, and it
Yeah.
kills me that it's sitting there empty while we're away. We could be planning your holiday with someone else being in your place.
I used to make jokes about it. Tiffany's known me for a long time. I always make jokes about it. That I was like, if my,
It's
if you're going for 2 weeks.
Instead of having a friend drop in, you have someone like
Paying.
people come and pay out for 2 weeks. I mean, we did it for 6 months going to New Zealand.
It took me a while to convince my husband, who I was supposed to tell you left. He's like, I'm going to sneak out. Will anyone notice? I'm like, what if they think you don't like it? He went to play Catan. There's a Catan league in town. They're playing board games. It's Monday night. That's why I have these events on Mondays. It took me a while to convince my husband. And the way I finally convinced him was I showed him the numbers on it. And I said, and he's like, well, where am I supposed to go for the weekend? And I'm like, if someone's giving you $1,000, I don't care where you go. Do you want to go to Vancouver for the weekend, go see a hockey game? I don't care. Like even if you just broke even, in my mind. Even if you just broke even, but you had the opportunity to go visit your friend and go see a hockey game, and I don't, you do you. Go sit at a beach. Like or you just swap. That's the other thing you can do is just swap. I mean, obviously it doesn't work for everyone. It's more difficult when you have kids, obviously, to keep hucking your kids out of a house, but that's what we do. We live in a vacation rental, and we have it all designed so that all of our stuff locks up, so no one sees our stuff, and all of our stuff is secure. And
You rent it out when you want to rent it out. You're there when you. It also encourages you to live a little bit more simply. Put all that stuff everywhere when you go out.
oh yeah, like even with us being minimalists, I can still find a box full of stuff to get out of our house. I just did it yesterday. I was like, oh, we haven't used that pan in like 6 months. Goodbye, get out of my house. I don't have time for this. So we live in a tiny home. Sorry? Tiffany's been at my house, so.
You have like the Manhattan apartment that is everything so
I do. I do, and they lock. I have like this modular, we love it.
It's so well done, I could actually live.
Yeah. I would encourage you to appeal to the town of Canmore to let people do it. Let people do this. I've tried appealing to the town of Canmore for years, and not because I manage properties. To be honest, I'm not going to manage your home share property. We manage big luxury properties in Silvertip. But because I knew what a big lifestyle change it meant for us. It meant that we got to travel. Like I've tried appealing to town council over and over again, being like, let people do this.
That's also
Have a better quality of life.
that's zoned. So condo complexes up in Three Sisters, you can't do that.
I know. So that's why we have to appeal to the town of Canmore to have that changed. Because zoning does change.
Sneakily, like our person next
I-
to us is from Edmonton, they advertise in the Edmonton.
I wouldn't recommend doing it sneakily, only because the town is handing out $2,500 fines. And especially if you have a tiny apartment, $2,500 will wipe out all of your revenue.
They're walking around lost in our condo complex in Wheeler City.
Yeah.
For sure.
I wouldn't recommend doing it illegally, but I would recommend taking the time to appeal to town council. And it takes a while. I've been appealing for 10 years.
When they focus on appealing like as an individual for your individual situation of property, or is it more like in general?
In general. So we've been appealing in general. We've been appealing in general. So the same, I apologize, I'm off topic now. I do that because those of you who were at the last one know that I do that. So for example, I appealed for Uber to be here. I have a car. I have no intention of Ubering. However, I knew that it had an impact for the people that lived here. It had an impact for the visitors here, and it had an impact for the people that maybe struggle to pay rent here. And Uber is a very nice, convenient, flexible way to use an asset that you already have, like a house, and make the world a better place. So no, I wasn't appealing for my own property, because to be honest, I have home shared before, back before they were giving out the massive fines. I have done it. I won't do it anymore, but that's more because I don't have to. There's some downsides to it, let's just say that. You let strangers in your house, but if I was young, I 100% would do it. I for sure would do it. I would rent out that room every night, and I would take that money and I would get ahead. So yeah, when I say appeal to the town, I mean appeal to the town to change zoning. And it happens, but it takes a long time. So for example, 3 months ago, they just changed the zoning to allow suites in all neighborhoods. Prior to that, there was a good 15 years that everybody fought over, I don't want suites in my neighborhood. It increases parking. I don't want those people next to me. It went on for over a decade. And people kept over and over and over again saying, we have a shortage of housing, something has to be done. If we put our heads together, we can find a better way. So to me, home sharing is a
And then
better
you
option.
can't have one next to you, a neighbor across the road or
Correct.
something. Like, that's a new thing, right?
No, that's been around for quite some time.
But now Airbnb's not allowed, more people are trying to B&B, and
Yes.
there's restrictions of, oh, your neighbor's already got one,
Yes.
sorry, you're out.
So back when it was only, so what we're talking about, a bed and breakfast license, the way the bed and breakfast bylaw hasn't changed. You can only have a bed and breakfast like I think it's every third adjacent house, because they didn't want every single house to be a bed and breakfast on one row. And what people are doing to get around the Airbnb, like the fact that you can't Airbnb here, is that they're saying, oh, I have a B&B that's different because I provided breakfast, and all the breakfast is a liter of milk and some cereal. Meets the mandate. Anyway, so now a bunch of places have applied for these. Now every neighborhood is like maxed out of B&Bs.
But
Anyway,
also has to have legal requirements for exiting and safety and all the rest.
parking, landscaping. My neighbor did it. So my neighbor, yeah, it's a lot.
It is a lot, especially.
But find a way. I mean, the model of us just having this one house and then it sits vacant when we travel, when more and more people have flexible lifestyles and they want that ability to travel.
Why a lot of people are here.
Yeah, exactly. But it takes time. Like I said, I started appealing to the town in 2009. Sometimes I give up on it. Sometimes I'm like, I have better things to do with my time and I let it go. And then other times I ramp it up. Depends on how much energy I have. Yep.
Can we just go back to
Buy somewhere that you don't live.
Let me get a question, but I can't figure out what it was. But, so you recommend that sort of strategy? Because like the thing is, if you buy where you don't live, like for instance, like a rental property,
Yes.
then you're not there to take care of it.
Hire a manager. If the numbers make sense, they make sense. And even for people that are managing it themselves, which if you were buying where you didn't live, you wouldn't be doing that because you don't live there and you're not there. I would still recommend, most property management companies charge like 8 to 10% of the income for securing tenants and keeping track of stuff. Even if you were managing it yourself and you were looking at numbers because you wanted to buy a place, I would still recommend budgeting that money because I'm sure you would like to get paid. Like you don't just want to work for free. So even though it's not coming out of your pocket, you still want to have that built in that you're not working for free. So if you look at it from that point of view, if there's a property somewhere else, and when you budget 8 to 10% for property management, along with all the other things, property taxes, condo fees, maintenance, all the other things, if those numbers make sense, they make sense. So when I do this presentation in Canmore, I specifically say that because I'm acutely aware that Canmore is expensive. And I want to remind people that there is no rule that you have to live in the house you buy. We sometimes forget that. Get into real estate somehow. If it's buying a timeshare because that's where you're at, go for it. If it's renting out a room to make extra revenue, go for it. If it's buying a place in Red Deer or Ontario, go for it.
Do you know, like, what's a good way to look up vacancy rates and how often vacancy is so we can be looking at?
The CMHC, literally Google it, vacancy rate for. The CMHC, which is the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, they usually publish it. And they'll tell you what the average rent is. Now, they don't often do secondary markets, so sometimes you need to guess a little bit.
They're around blue collar and universities.
Yeah, one of the things I learned I go to real estate events all the time because clearly this is what brings me joy. One of the real estate speakers I was at once, he put up a map of Calgary, and then he drew a concentric circle around the hospitals, and he drew a concentric circle around the universities, and he said, where these circles intersect, buy property there, because you'll always have tenants. Someone is working at the hospital, and someone is going to school. And those aren't changing. Those are companies that are going to be there. Hospitals don't change hands overnight. Sorry?
Education.
Exactly. And that was his model. He does long-term rentals, though. For me, I do short-term rentals, so I'm looking for vacation places. Where do people want to go? A vendor take-back mortgage is another one that can help you. Oh, sorry. What a vendor take-back mortgage is, so for example, I own my house. I might not want the $1 million from it, because what am I going to do with it? Nothing. What I could do is I can become the bank, though. Someone can pay me a mortgage payment, and I'm going to make 4% on that money. And I'm going to get that money every month because I've taken back the mortgage. So that's another way that, you know, it isn't always just banks are where this magical pool of money comes from. Usually people that want a vendor take-back mortgage, they tend to be older, they tend to be retired, and sometimes there's a benefit to them taking the money a little bit over time from a tax perspective, because they're going to claim that as income, right? Every month you pay them that interest, that's their income, but they're going to get a little bit over time as opposed to just selling the house. And now I have $1 million, what am I supposed to do with it? I have no idea what to do with it. And that's another one, like rent to own. It's a little bit different. But if you ever see an ad that says they'll make it VTB, owner interested in VTB, great. I'd love to have your house. I'd love to give you interest instead of the bank. And a joint venture is another one. So when I keep clicking, sorry. A joint venture is another one. So all a joint venture is when I use the example of the roommates living together, it just means that 3 or 4 of you go in on that mortgage. You can have 6 people on a mortgage. So as long as those are all income producing, reasonably responsible adults that hopefully you get along with because you're probably going to be living with them for the next 5 years, you can have 6 people on that mortgage. So one really good model is like a couple and a single, because the couple in Canmore might stretch to get a property. But as soon as you add the income from that other single, now you've opened yourself up to a world of listings in this town. With an income suite. Even better if you, the couple and the single, can live in the upstairs and you're renting the downstairs or the backyard or the garden suite or whatever it is. Whatever. I know, I always go over time. I was on time at one point, and then it went sideways. I'm going to skip through these. I know I talked about the last one, and some of you were here at the last one. There are 2 things that the government do to help you get a mortgage. One of them is the home buyer's plan, which allows you to take penalty-free money out of your RRSP. If you're just getting started, then the method would be please get an RRSP, because you can only take money out of it if you had money in it. The other one they just started, which is the first-time home buyer's incentive. In essence, what the government is doing is saying, I will give you 5 to 10%, depending on what kind of property it is. The government is going to give you 5 to 10% towards your down payment. However, they also own 5 to 10% of your house. So if you can pay them back, great. If for some reason you end up selling your house, they in essence have a little bit of an equity stake. They've invested in your house. Mm-hmm. And I am not super as up to date as I'd like to be because they only brought it out a couple months ago.
So
maybe 4 months.
If you have 5%, does it just
Oh yeah, you can't. You still need some of your money. So you can't just go into a house with no money down. Where this will help you is that if you have 5% and the government gives you 5%, now your mortgage payment is lower. You pay less interest. You might be able to afford a different house, different neighborhood. Yeah, you do have to still have some money in it.
So it says they match you or something, or it just will give you 4 or 5 to 10% as a loan?
It's a loan, so you do have to pay it back. And you pay it back within, did I put it? It must be repaid in 25 years or when you sell the house. So if you haven't paid it back and you sell the house, if they gave you 5% of the value of that house, they take 5% of the new increased value. Even the government is saying that real estate is a good investment because they don't do this with stocks. No one's offering you money to go buy stocks.
And then with the 4 times, let's just say you're a server, average income 15,000, you couldn't get more than 60.
Correct.
But if you're 50,000, you could get 200,000.
This is the full value of the house.
Limited to 4 times the qualified income. I'd have to go back and look because I want to make sure that I'm giving you accurate information. The cap
It says limited to 4 times.
of the qualifying income, they have a cap on what their qualifying income is, which means when, unfortunately, I mean, the government tried to do something.
I believe it's 130,000, so you can
Yeah.
or 120. So you can't get a house that's worth more than 430,000.
Yeah. So what happened was when they released this, to the credit of the government, they tried to do something, right? They tried to help residents. And then all the people from Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver said, I can't afford a house here. You capped the amount. So it's not for everybody. But it's a start.
Beneficial to some.
It's beneficial to some people. Yeah. It's beneficial to you. Yeah. So write it down so you remember to look it up. It is new, so everyone's just getting, like, the home buyer's plan has been around since I bought my first house. In fact, they've increased it. Back then, we were only allowed to take out 20 grand. They've increased it to 25. I think it's 120.
So you can get 150
How did they do this? So you could buy a house worth 480,000, 4 times the qualifying income, the maximum qualifying income, which is not going to work in Toronto, Vancouver, or, yeah, it's not going to work. Nope. Just for you. See, that's why the smaller group is nicer. If there was 800 of you in here, then,
unless you go into a Blackstone property or a smaller.
well, they won't give mortgages on those. Although, to be honest, the government should. They should probably make some money on it. This is honestly just the math of what I was describing earlier. These are actual numbers. So I pulled the actual numbers from one of our condos, because sometimes people don't know how much property taxes are. So that specific condo right now is worth about $450,000. It's here in Canmore. When you qualify for your mortgage, see how I have the bigger number, 2,164, and the little number, 1,730? The government changed a rule recently that said when they run these calculations, they're going to run the calculations at a higher interest rate. So the qualifying interest rate that they run these numbers at is 5.34%. So that's what the bigger number is. However, chances are good you'd probably get a mortgage for less, and that's what the little number is, what your mortgage payment would actually be. And the government has built this in so that if there's fluctuations to interest rates, nobody's getting into trouble, which is what happened in 2008. That's how a lot of people got into a lot of really bad trouble. Monthly heating expenses. So this is a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom condo, 1,100 square feet in Canmore. Our average monthly heat bill is $86. The property tax is $186. And for that building, I'm not really happy with what our condo fees are, but that is actually them, $387. So in order to be able to buy that property, someone would have to have a gross monthly income of $8,065, gross, before taxes. Presumably, that's probably 2 people.
So what's that in a year?
In a year? 8 times 96 times. That's why I said it's probably 2 people. Oh, goodness. I did some bad math there.
Certainly not even 2 hospitality people.
Well, everyone needs to start somewhere. Back when I worked in hospitality, I used to have 3 jobs. Like, that's how I paid for my first house. It was hustling. Like, I couldn't do it now, but I did it when I could. $8,065, I calculated the math, so it's in my notes, is about $23 an hour times 2 people. So you're right, a minimum wage worker, it's not, unless you're working twice as many hours a day, hustling, or you're serving, you can make $23 an hour easy serving. You could make, You have to claim your tips. That's the,
I thought that once
You-
you put your claim they actually don't count as income.
they will. You have 2 years history of it. I mean, otherwise car salesmen would never, and real estate agents would never get mortgages. They all work on commission. Tips is just commission.
And legally,
Or casual employment.
legally, if they go after you, they're looking for documented tips. Cash is gifts, which really add up to 120 or 100,000 cash.
True, but if I want to buy a house, I have to claim it. So that was what I did.
That's the goal, yes.
That was my goal. There, I made it to the end. Oh, sorry.
Last mortgage, what is roughly the value of the properties?
$450,000. So that was that's an actual condo here. It is not for sale, however. But I wanted to pull actual numbers of like, what is the heating bill for an average property? Sometimes you don't know. If your rent includes it, you might have no idea how much the heat bills actually are. So that's an average apartment. Sometimes your condo fees include the heat, in which case the bank will take that line item out. A lot of the buildings here, the condo fees will include the heat.
Electricity, gas, what do you think?
They don't calculate it. In that 35%, like, I realize that you will have electricity, but in their 35% calculation, they're only looking at mortgage, heating, property tax, and condo fees.
That's quite high, it's employed, so it's.
Ontario will be quite high. They just don't use it for this calculation. For your personal calculations, when you're looking at, so for example, you could look at 2 places and one of them has electric baseboard heat and single pane windows and all sorts of other weird stuff going on. Their electricity bill is going to be huge. So even though the bank doesn't use it to calculate, you might still want to use it to calculate so that you don't move into a place that your electric bill is $400 a month. That's it. That's my next class. It's how to travel more and pay less. Although the town won't let me have it here. The town was like, well, our mandate is it has to be stuff like how to buy a home or that kind of stuff.
So where are you gonna have it?
Elsewhere. I laughed though. I'm like, you think people don't like to travel in this town? I think it makes their life better, but it's just elsewhere.
So where are you gonna put the advertisement in the paper?
No. I'm literally just going to rely on people to tell people. I don't mind if it's a small group, so it doesn't bother me. Whoever comes, comes. It's on Facebook.
What happened? There's no details.
Oh, sorry, it's on the previous page. It's February 10th. It's also on this website, livesharper.com. It's literally like the only reason that website is up is to advertise that one event. What time is it? 7 o'clock? I'm saying this from memory.
To be decided.
The location is to be decided because sometimes it's 5 people and we're just going to go to Beamer's. And sometimes it's 30 people, in which case we'll probably be at the rec center or a hotel. The one thing I will say about those events though, when the town hosts them, they're free because the town gives me the venue. Those ones I have people pay for, but you get refunded when you attend. So
It's a lot of time and effort to sit there.
yeah, and I really liked the model of when people bail, I get paid more. So if you all come and want the knowledge, I'm happy to share it. But if you get a ticket and make me show up and you don't show up, I will happily take your money. Eh. No worries, have a great night. I made it somewhat late. It happens. I didn't know you were coming. No, I don't see the registration list. I was super busy getting ready for tonight. Is it better than I filled it up from the water fountain, and this has got to be Canmore's worst water. Like I've never had bad water in this town, but is it terrible? Yeah, I don't know. Well, I got it from the water fountain. I got it from the water fountain though. The pipes might have just been sitting there for a while.
Yeah, but you know, sometimes a thermos has had, say, coffee or tea.
Yeah. This one tastes like moldy pipes. It's not great. was nice to see you. I know, it's only when I'm on stage. You can see what I look like normally.
Okay, well, I'm gonna try to come, I think, on the 10th. No one else is there.
It's always on a Monday because that's when Sean plays Catan. Everyone's like, why are your events on Monday? Because Sean plays board games.
Yeah, but he didn't leave last week.
Because the other one wasn't on a Monday. The town chose the date based on when this room was available. And then after that, I was like, if you want me to come, it's going to be a Monday. So it's always Monday.
Okay, well,
Cheers. I'll see you. I'm going to DC on Friday. Wait, what day is today? Today is Monday. I'm going to DC on Friday. I literally fly in on the morning of the 9th, and then the class is on the 10th.
Okay, well, then we'll make a plan after that.
All right. Some brunch. I'll talk to you later. It was nice to see you again. My pleasure. Are you closer to buying your house?
probably.
Okay.
Mostly because my partner and I have talked about it so much now.
Good.
Like, on the same page, we have a plan.
Well, that's what it takes, right? People have to start somewhere, and if you're not talking about it, then everyone's just kind of flailing around, not knowing what to do. Perfect. It was nice to see you again. Bye. Thanks for coming, Francine.
Guess you have no paperwork to take home with us, eh?
I don't. Would you?